All right, welcome back. This is the tail end now of the program, and we want to focus on a report that was making every Kenyan a bit antsy from IMF that is warning on bailout conditions that could spark Kenya's civil unrest. And it says the measures taken to balance government finances could spawn Arab Spring-like protest. Let me try and zoom in there. And it says the International Monetary Fund has cautioned that its stringent conditions to provide financial support to Kenya risks sparking civil unrest. The IMF appears to allude to its stringent bailout conditions that require the Kenya Kwanza administration to cut subsidies, mostly on energy and food, and raise new taxes seen as punitive by already hard-pressed Kenyans. The austerity measures have brewed massive discontent among Kenyans across social and political divides. Unrest could re-emerge in connection with protests against the higher cost of living, the need to raise more taxes, and the electoral process supported by the political opposition, said the IMF in its special dispatch to Kenya. The Kenya Kwanza administration, which took over in September 2022, has been under pressure to bring down the cost of living and create jobs. However, some of its proposed tax and policy measures backed by the IMF and World Bank in exchange for bailout packages, seen as crucial to stabilizing the government's finances, have been questioned by various interest groups, which has stoked social tensions. This is where we're at right now. We want to see, is it a tinderbox that is waiting to explode, so to speak, with now this policy shift that you're talking about from China, and we've been slowly gravitating towards the West, and stringent measures that we can see from the Bretton Woods institutions. What they're putting it here is like Arab-like Spring. We remember Mohammed Amwazi, of the self-immolation in Tunisia that sparked the Jasmine Revolution. Let's just discuss that.
Yeah, let's go back a little bit to touch up with what we say. I mean, what we were saying before we went for the short break. The point was whether we are speaking from both sides of the mouth.
Indeed.
This also applies to this, and what are the consequences of those kind of policies. President Kenyatta was unrepentantly pro-West. Mm-hmm. And he never pretended. In fact, at a certain stage, the Chinese embassy was almost dysfunctional in Nairobi. To be seen closer to the Russian embassy was tantamount to asking the police to arrest you those days. So he was unrepentantly pro-West. And Moi came, when he came to power, he was unrepentantly pro-West until they started questioning his government, and basically kind of putting an embargo on funding, particularly from the West, and started feeling the pinch. And from 1985 onwards, he simply moved sharply to the Rukist policy. So Moi was actually the father of the Rukist policy, and when he moved, he stated it and said, I have now moved to West. And he even got musicians, Camaros and others, to sing about his journey to Beijing and so on. And in Beijing, you find big portraits of Moi in hotels and wherever he had dinner, because it was a big issue those days. Consistency that time. I've moved from the West, I'm now moved East, because that's where my interests are. Kasarani was built, and other stadiums were built, Moi Lifaro Hospital, and so on. You can mention a lot of things that he got from those trips. When Kibaki came to power, he was very clear in his mind that I'll deepen my relationship with the West, but I'll also move very, very strongly to the East for the purpose of development. So for him, it was very clear. Security issues and a bit of our foreign policy, because of our historical relationship with the West, we are going to deepen. So he did not close the embassy in London. Instead, he opened an embassy in Dublin, because our interest was Haiti, that's Northern Ireland, and so on and so forth. So the point is that he was consistent and was very clear about that. The same case with President Uhuru. When he came in his April 9th speech in 2013, who was very clear that I am going to be African-centered. And this is going to be my policy. And I think as a country, we bent back many times to accommodate Africa. He didn't have to proclaim himself Pan-Africanist or people to say he's Pan-Africanist. He was, you could read Pan-Africanism in him, and that's him. And that, again, was consistent. I remember very well when he paid his first state visit to the United States of America. There were calls, those who were aware of it, calls that he doesn't go to Beijing because there were only 3 days and he was one of the guests, the principal guest in the Belt and Road Initiative in China. And he said he had to leave Washington and then go to Beijing. Because for him, America matters to us and China also matters to us. It is about us, it is not about them. Now, what I think we're calling for is consistency in terms of speech. I mean, I don't care whether you move east or you move west, but state it very clearly so that people can predict. If it's about climate, excuse me. If it's about climate, the climate change that we're talking about, and therefore these things, scholars and everybody will tell you that this talk about climate change and climate adaptation and all this, these are big words to mean something else. Carbon investments. So Qatar is not going to stop producing oil. Saudi Arabia is not going to stop producing oil. What they look for is for reason to continue producing oil without being censored globally. And therefore they will come and take acres of land in Africa and elsewhere and grow trees and say that we are producing these carbon credits, therefore we can export this amount of oil. So that kind of dancing is what somebody needs to tell us is happening so that we get to know. But let's not have a holier than thou. The angels are on this side and the devils are on this side, and therefore I am with the devils or I'm with the angels. No, no, no. Just be clear about it. Because this is a country that cannot do without pragmatism. And I think that's what Dr. was saying. We are supposed to be a very pragmatic country. One, we don't have all the resources we need. Two, we want all friends, because what guides us in our transactions are our interests. But to state our interests clearly. So when you champion a certain policy, which the West is championing, and you champion it as it's your own, then the Africans don't trust you. They will not say so because African diplomacy is not about mega diplomacy. They keep quiet. So it's quiet diplomacy. They keep quiet. So what you find are these eruptions, like in Sudan, those ones can't mediate our conflict. You come to Tanzania, we are going to do this. You go to Uganda, we are going to do this. They start negotiations. So you find that you have so many problems, and yet these leaders had not spoken. It is now the effect of quiet diplomacy. So I wanted to make that clarification that I have personally no problem with the position we take, whether we are Rook West or Rook East. The question is where our interests are. And now that ties to what we are talking about here. Our move to the West has taken us back to the shackles of World Bank, IMF, and the Bretton Woods. We are where we were in the 1980s, where when the IMF chief is coming to the airport, we all have waters in our stomachs. What is he going to say? In other words, these are our lords. It's like Queen Elizabeth is coming to Nairobi in 1945 or 1950. This is the kind of feeling we get. And I think it doesn't go down well with our sovereignty as a country. And two, we are not speaking truth to ourselves or even to the people. Why are we not speaking the truth? Because we are not saying that moving west means we prefer debts of the West rather than debts of the East. Because we come to power by saying we want to tax our people so that we are debt-free. Yet we are incurring debt from the West to the point that we are now being enslaved by the West. Why don't we come out clean and tell our people that Western debts are sweeter than Eastern debts, but debts we'll have. So if you are cooking ugali for us, just tell us we're going to have ugali, that it is not going to be as hard as the one of the West. The ones that our rural people make is going to be softer, like the ones the Okuyu make. because they have to eat it with vegetables. Just tell us the truth, because we are going to, either way, we are going to eat ugali.
Yes.
It is the texture of that ugali that we want.
You see,
you get what I mean? So, debts will have. Stating that true, because we made the point from the beginning, no country has ever developed without debts. We made that point.
Yes.
Even America, Japan is the third largest economy and has a debt that is more than 10 times, it's what we call the ceiling. You just go check, it is there online. So Japan is one of the most indebted countries in the world, and it is also the richest. So debt is not a problem. It's how you utilize it and how you use it to blend. And Japan is also the major donor to a country like Kenya. So in short, we're saying we have moved from the frying pan into the fire, because this debt with the World Bank and the IMF come with other things, human rights. And which human rights are we talking about?
Okay.
Look at Uganda. So the human rights we are talking about are not about not killing or not doing anything. It's about how you behave in your bedroom.
So let me ask you, this tension, because when we have such a statement tripping off from the Bretton Woods institutions in regard to civil unrest, how palpable is it when they give such a warning? Because I think we also need to give us some stock of seriousness when it comes from the... Sequentially, we'll come to it.
Okay.
Yeah. Ibal, first of all, Prof mentioned, it doesn't care whether we move east or we move west or we move south, as long as you advance your national interest. And generally that's generally true. The trouble is where the world is today. The world has changed. You have what we call the relative decline of the West and the rise of the rest. That makes a country like Kenya, it becomes too expensive to openly take one side over the other, because you're going to lose, because not just one other player who is out there, you're going to have so many other players who are going to be out there. And today, if we look at the region, for instance, you have heavy presence of a number of both the great powers and the emerging powers. And they're all significant in their own ways, and we're dealing with all of them. And so we have to be cognizant of this fact, so that we cannot afford to openly take one side or the other. It's going to cost us, unless we are drinking too much Kool-Aid that we actually cannot see the reality in front of us. Number two, we don't need IMF or World Bank, or rather to tell us about the potential consequences of our apparent misbehavior. Okay, I'm saying misbehavior is sometimes we can have ambitions, but we need to be able also to moderate them to ensure they don't lead to certain things. So of course they're warning the potential for civil unrest. And this is something when you're having increased number of people who are desperate, and especially young people, who may have no jobs and may have no hope. And what the person who has no hope is an extremely dangerous individual, because the only thing they have to lose is their hopelessness. Understand? There is nothing to hang on to. And we didn't have to wait for that, because as people, as a society, as government, this is information that should already be with us. Now, what does that mean to a national security? Youth bulge can be a massive dividend if it's used properly, if it can be given opportunity to contribute to national development. But when you have youth bulge and a number of educated unemployed with no source of income, it becomes extremely dangerous. It's the same reason why sometimes when countries go to war and they build up massive militaries, at the end of the war, you're having a lot of young men and women who are competent, trained, but they have nothing to do. They're going to overthrow you, for instance. And so Saddam employed that in 1981 when he realized, coming from Iranian war, that he had too many people who had nothing to do, so he had to send them to Kuwait so they don't turn against him. Now, while we don't have the same equivalent, the truth is our youth bulge is also a time bomb, because they are lacking opportunity. Now, unfortunately, and in the last few years, we had COVID, then we had war, then we had an environment right now that is imposing heavy cost on an average citizen to the extent where it's increasingly difficult for them to make a living. Now, this is not a political issue, neither is it a partisan issue. This is actually a national security issue. If we don't look at it seriously, we're going to wake up one morning and people are surrounding our houses saying Mali yetu. That is not what you want to do. But unfortunately, that is a real prospect we are facing if we don't honestly look ourselves in the mirror and try to fix some of the problems that have gone wrong.
Mm-hmm. Right. Dr.
Yes, thank you, Dibal. First, let me revisit what Prof was saying earlier. You know, what is important for us as a country, Prof, is what we once upon a time used to call in diplomacy positive engagement, and the quality of it. Whether we want to ride the tiger or not, or we want to ride the horse or not, meaning the West, the tiger to the east, the bottom line is how do we take care of our national interests? Positive engagement allows us to bite a little bit of the east and a little bit of the west for as long as it works for us. That's number one. Number two, our history is replete with what Hassan is saying here. And Hassan, you were my good student. That's why you have remembered this thing of the youth bulge. After the British, collected Africans and made them carrier corps and soldiers in the Second World War. When the war ended and the young men came home and had no war to fight, had no luggage to carry anywhere, they became a menace. And that provided the route for violent nationalism in Kenya that will culminate in the country's independence. The likes of Mau Mau movement emanated from there. Whether this is being repeated in our setting, probably something we need to watch out for. And I see it in it coming now in direct answer to your question, whether the predicted violence is likely. I mean, it's fairly obvious, Diba. Let me give you scenarios. The power plays at our national level between the opposition and those in government, between the president and the former prime minister, is now being replayed in our local levels. Their power struggles as who is the kingpin of this or that that region. You have seen in the last few weeks the massive violence in Kisii County, for example, power struggle between the governor and the chief whip, Silvanus Osoro. You have seen what's happening in Mount Kenya. If it's a secret, it's actually an open secret. You have seen what is happening in the North Rift between Jeregei and Minister Murkomen. Localized power struggles that are fairly violent. You've seen what's happening in the coast, that the coast has now seen a resurgence of new militia groups that we did not know of. The other week, they meted out violence into some groups and they literated, Now, away from that, look at the cost of living. Even those of us who have been having pretensions of middle class, lower or upper, we have already started feeling it. I have never had a thin pay slip like the one I have now. After the housing levy, the new NSSF and all that, And I could imagine many more people. The repercussions of this is I've reduced those who depend on me. Even at my personal level, reduce the number of people who work in my house, reduce the number of people who work in the different small farms that I have. At some point, I was responsible for about feeding 22 families. I've now reduced them to about 7. because that's now at my own personal level.
From 22.
Yeah, somebody else will say something else like that. Now, the institutions that are meant to protect the public against such are increasingly becoming weak. Parliament. I think the history of the country, Mheshimiwa, you are here, we have one of the weakest parliament at this moment in time. If you look at our current MPs, there is a way in which things are not working. Sometimes you wonder whether it is comedy. I don't know whether that's the case that led to the election of a number of comedians into parliament, in this parliament, and there are a number of them. I'm sure you know that. There's a way in which it has become a bit comical when you look at some of our parliamentarians. And I was wondering whether that's the reason why comedians had it very easy, and there are a number of them in parliament now. Those who used to do stand-up comedy, I'm sure, Dibali, you know, some of them could be your friends. So they are not checking the excesses of the executive. Those who are pro-government, they are excessively pro-government. Those who are pro-opposition, they are excessively pro-opposition. And when such a situation happens, then it's the ordinary Mwananchi who suffers. The judiciary had remained as a last resort. Everybody was running there. Now there is a confrontation between the executive and the judiciary. In the first round of this confrontation, I have a feeling that the judiciary has lost. That's perhaps why the Chief Justice has now come back the second time to say that we will stand firm. The first round she lost when she stepped at the threshold of State House, in my view, in some sense. So all these institutions have been weakened. So we now leave ourselves to the grace of God.
Right, and I think, Yusuf, this is should be a matter of your concern as well, as a delegated member of the Committee of Security and Foreign Relations and Intelligence, hearing that are there any embers of unrest that now they're blowing, and they could consummate into an inferno, a fire?
Yeah, before I answer that, I just wanted to quickly respond to the listener who raised the issue of Kwame Nkrumah, because I'm a Pan-Africanist and I'm a good student of and a follower of Kwame Nkrumah. And I just wanted to highlight that in his political leadership, Nkrumah evolved into an independent philosopher, political leader and philosopher. But the foundation of his intellectual and political thinking is based on Marxism. And I think maybe this gentleman should just read one book, The Last Stage of Capitalism, or imperialism, in which he talks about the development of the global economic situation as it is. And that is absolutely one of the best, I think, Marxist literature on the African continent and the developing countries. Having said that, I think I would like to comment also on our foreign policy. It is not in our national interest to put all our eggs in one basket. There is an extreme danger when you lean extremely on one particular global bloc against the other.
And Germany is a good case with Russia.
Yes, and I think, and given the fact that we're a developing country, we should not be doing that at the expense of other important nations, especially China, which is a rising power, and which has been a real friend of Kenya in terms of development, because our focus is in economic development. And one particular country that has been has played a critical role in our infrastructure development that is helping to lift up our economy is China. And so I think we should be very, very careful in balancing our relationship as a country, because it doesn't serve any purpose for us to be seen to be in one particular bloc, as has been said here. And I think there's a need for a correction in terms of our foreign policy. I would say that, in fact, when it comes to this analysis and predictions about the economic situation in this country has been very hard, particularly for the large number of unemployed, unwaged population. And if you look back at the election of 2022, the main focus was how to uplift the dissatisfaction of that particular sector of our population. And I feel that because I come from a constituency which is almost half an informal settlement with a very large youth population. And so when we're talking of the youth bulge, our huge youth population is definitely a ticking bomb, and it has been for a while. And that's why the main focus of the last elections was economic. And there was one political movement that said they had the answers to this particular issue, and they got elected. But even with the conditions that we have at the moment, we've always had a problem that could explode any time. And that's why we need progressive, visionary economic policies that will definitely move this country forward. And that has not happened to this point. And I think that many of these young people are not paying taxes because they have no money to pay taxes. So, you know, you're talking about the middle class here, feeling the pinch of the housing levy. The young people in Kamkunji, in Kibera, in our urban centers, do not have anything to pay for because they don't have employment. They don't have any hope towards the future. And that is the population that needs to be addressed more than anything else. I mean, a middle-class person can grumble about the fact that he's been overtaxed. But there's a huge number of people who've been left behind at the bottom of the ladder. And these people are not going to wait for any government or for any elite to find solutions for their problems. So I think it's just a question of time that when this particular group will rise up. But the only opportunity for the government is that at the moment that particular group is not organized. It is not, it doesn't have a depth of coordinating an action on their part, like, you know, the Arab, when people speak about the Arab Spring, the Arab countries that went through the uprisings, like Tunisia or Egypt, these are countries with a very large middle class. These are countries also that are they're kind of almost homogeneous. They don't have ethnic differences, they don't have religious differences. In Kenya, much of the organization for change is undermined by the fact that, in fact, people are divided on ethnicity, people are divided on social cleavages and so on. But there is a momentum in places like Nairobi, which is a melting point, where such a possibility may occur if we do not really address the critical economic needs of those populations we're talking about.
Indeed. So I think you raised the issue of jokers, and it's a statement or a quote I read somewhere that the problem with jokers is that we elected them. And I found that to be very interesting. The problem with jokers, we elect them. I just want us to bring this to a close.
Sonko as the governor of the capital city of Kenya.
Kenya, yes.
Professor Kagwanja, even as we're winding up, the question will be again, since now we're in this place and you're talking about the quality of, it's not about even the youth bulge, it's the quality of our youth. For the most in time that we've been talking in this country, that we have a huge youth dividend. But the employability of the youth, even as we were talking earlier regarding the skills, how employable are they? That is a problem. We could be saying, we have a resource, but what is the quality of that population?
I think we don't need to really beat ourselves up. Our youth are in very good shape compared with any African country. in terms of training. I think what we have, I mean, and I'm saying it because we, Dr. Ali and myself at the university, and we are training and we are doing our best under the circumstances. We are training. And in a class of about 20 kids, I mean, 15 of them will be, really good. And I've taught in the 3 continents. I've taught in Europe, I've taught in Africa, I've taught in North America. And therefore, when you make that kind of judgment, it's based on your own experience. We have good kids. I think the problem is this shift in education all the time. We're moving within a period of less than 20 years. We are now moving to 3 education systems, and sometimes with no reason. And therefore you find that most people, particularly those who are wealthy, are now preferring to go international because it appears more consistent. The British have not changed their system for don't care. So if you go to Pembroke or you go to whichever, that's it. Now, but let me make the point about what we are seeing here, where we are headed, because it is very, very important to state it very clearly. Dr. Kanenje talked about the youth bulge. The youth bulge in Kenya is no longer a time bomb. We are in the little ticking end of the ticking bomb. Why? Because for the first time, we are having kids who are leaving university because they cannot afford it. You have gone up to second year and you cannot finish your education, and you are going back to the village. So we have that. The funding is not there for education. Employment is not there. There are no jobs in the village. Some cannot come to urban area because they cannot even afford it to stay in urban areas. So people are locked in silos of poverty. And those silos of poverty is what the World Bank is talking about. On top of that, our middle class, which is largely made of youth, people in their 30s who have left the universities, who have left, that category of the middle class has now collapsed. It has collapsed because of a collective a number of events, including COVID-19, and the way we handled it. Because rather than handling COVID-19 the way the other countries did by putting money in people's pockets so that they can buy in shops and keep shops going, we talked about reducing VAT and all that, like it was business as usual. And therefore, we now have a youth bulge that has education, that had hope, but now gone, and a youth bulge that is basically a lightning rod. You just need to strike the match, and the country is gone. I say it, and I want to say this and conclude. I didn't worry much about the post-election violence, the violence, what they call the Sufuria Revolution. I didn't care about the Sufuria Revolution in January. It didn't worry me because after every election we must have these kind of things because of elite power sharing. But now we are past that. So the moment we move from the Sufuria Revolution, the next thing that we are going to get now is worse. And I say so because the tension in the country is palpable. You can cut it with a knife. And it is not about that the country, Kenya, is worse than other countries. It is because of the perception. Instead of telling people we are going to lighten your load, you speak like the Rehoboam of the Bible, that my father was whipping me with, jabok. I will whip you with the scorpions. So you think it's right for you? I am going to put road tolls, the tolls on your roads. You think it's right for you? You're going to pay taxes for your swimming pools. I mean, every day you're finding this fear, and therefore the country is beginning to become like a gas cylinder. You open it and it will explode. You yourself will not find your own location.
Yeah.
So we are taking time bombs.
Right. Let's leave it at that because I want us also just briefly.
A small, quick one on that. Just to give you a practical example, Diba. Our youth are great. Our kids are working extremely hard, and I will tell you that. And I've seen it in my lifetime. If you see the generations seated around this table, the generation of Professor Kawanja taught me Dr. Juma taught me.
Yes.
With Kanyinga and the rest.
Yes.
So Kawanja produced me. As a young lecturer in the university, I taught Hassan, and he's sitting here with me. I'm sitting here with Kanyinga. That alone, with Kawanja. I talk about Kanyinga because
grandfather
to I have seen Kenyan young people who work very hard. As we speak, over the 6,000 students I produced when I was running Utalii. I'm very proud when I find them in different parts of the world, not just in Africa, not just in Europe, not just in anywhere. They are now ventured when the local hospitality industry got a bit messed up. They are ventured to working in sailing ships. Many of them are coming back and showering us with presents, including what I'm having here. I was given as a present by my student who got a job with some ship which goes around the world 6 months, and then he gets 2 months holiday. They get there because they work very hard. The challenge we have, and Prof, you said we have changed our education system with no reason. There's a reason called political expediency. That's the only reason why we keep on changing our education system, to the extent that those of us who are in the sector don't understand exactly where we are, because the changes have been very, very fast. So what we need, Dibal, is just for one to stop.
Thank you.
And think about this situation and find immediate solution, medium term and long term.
Thank you.
Without that,
right. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think we've also given it much premium, and we need to. We left with around 10 minutes, and I want us to discuss the Haiti deployment briefly, so that we can hear from you. And Honorable Hassan also, we touched on it yesterday just briefly. And we know that President William Ruto has said he will appeal a court ruling rejecting a planned deployment of Kenyan police officers to Haiti. Ruto promised last year that Kenya will lead a multinational force to help fight gangs in the troubled Caribbean nation. But critics challenge his legal authority. In a statement, Ruto's government reiterated its commitment to honoring the country's international obligations and says it will appeal a court ruling. The challenge to the deployment was brought to court by 3 petitioners, including opposition politician and constitutional lawyer Ekuro Aukot, who claims the proposed deployment was unconstitutional. Let's just begin from there, Dr. Hassan Kanenje, with this latest development and the president's gesture that he was going to, of course, appeal this particular ruling by the courts. And that
there's just a developing story where the president said he is going to deploy as early as next week.
Early as next week. So in light of what the court has said?
He said that at a press statement in Rome.
In Rome. Okay.
Yeah,
as early as next week, and still we have the courts which have slammed it. It's going full steam ahead. We have the U.S. Department of Justice also standing in solidarity with President William Ruto against this particular decision. Your comments?
Yeah, Dibal, I don't claim competence in constitutional prerogatives with regard to president's powers, especially in foreign policy. What I understand is foreign policy, a lot of times the president has a lot of powers with regard to what he can do. A lot of, perhaps, Parliament sometimes constrains those powers depending on the provisions that are provided within constitutions, Kenya included. Now, I don't understand the exact merits. However, I suspect, this is something that Kenya has decided to, and the president, of course, is leading that mission. My own bias with regard to foreign policy is the president still may actually have the powers to proceed and do that. But I would be hesitant to proceed with that if the court has said otherwise. And so perhaps a framework or the government should appeal to demonstrate that actually this is still within the prerogative and the powers of the president can go ahead. So the question is whether you agree with the president's decision or whether it's a wise thing or not. But in my assessment, it should still be within his powers to be able to execute that.
And don't you raise hesitation with the fact that the president will also actually speak on international podium and say that despite the fact that we have this ruling by the courts, I'll go full steam ahead and deploy as we agreed because we have an international obligation. What does it speak to other jurisdictions regarding also the efficacy of our constitution and how we honor our constitution as being the ultimate document that we need to stand by? And this is what you have actually tell Kenyans that you'll protect the constitution.
You see, as things stand, Deepal, the president is the CEO of the country, and there are decisions that he has to make, and also be responsible for the consequences that come out of those decisions now and in the future. And I think he has a right to do so. But then there are a number of things that come out of a situation such as this. One, of course, is this idea, and it looks like it's now being proven, our closeness with foreign powers in the things that we do internally or in decisions that we are supposed to take internally. It looks like the whole thing is being driven by more by external forces than internal ones. Because if it was internal ones and our courts are saying, wait a minute, then we could have waited. But since the external powers are more powerful than the internal ones, then it's likely that the external powers will win in this case. But if you look at the general public opinion in the country, and if you understand the history of Haiti, which some of us can lay claim on, it would be a very interesting scenario to look at, because chances are very high that we are not likely to succeed where others have terribly failed. This idea looked like DOA, if I may use those initials that are used by doctors, dead on arrival, when it started, because of the real world on the ground. The situation in Haiti is not as easy as we may think. We have said this before here. Those are war-hardened people. And taking a police force, which seems to ride on the back of the United States, might not sell very quickly in the local situations in Haiti.
Thank you.
If I were the president, I could take all this into consideration.
All right. Yusuf Hassan, you want to comment on it?
Yeah, well, I think this is a foreign policy issue. Yes. And when it comes to foreign policy, the president has the powers to act on behalf of our country in international relations.
In this regard also of the court ruling?
No, I'm coming to that point.
Okay.
So the president has those powers, and he has the approval of the National Assembly. He has the approval of Parliament. So it is quite strange for this matter to be taken up by the courts, when in fact the two other branches of government, the executive and the legislature, have already pronounced on it. The second element is
but even from the legislature's point of view, it was faulty.
Allow me.
Yes.
No, it is not. It's not. It is. We have always had a tradition in which the president and parliament determine whether we send peacekeepers abroad, and we have done that sovereignly. It is not something new. So I think maybe the question...
We were on that topic yesterday.
The question is we want to ask is whether the judiciary should have taken this matter up. That is the question that we should be asking, because there is here an infringement on the separation of powers in our political system. So one needs to ask that. It's not straightforward as you might think. Suppose our country was invaded. Wouldn't the president declare war to protect our territory? He would have to. And our police force have been deployed in peacekeeping efforts all over the world, in many countries, in Sierra Leone, in Liberia, in Timor, in many other places in the world, in Namibia. So there's a precedent. And there are times when maybe the judiciary should not infringe on the powers that are given to the executive as well as to the legislature. That is why we need balance. So in this particular case, of course, I would advise the president to seek to take an appeal and to challenge this particular decision. But we cannot escape the fact that here there's a collusion. Who has the powers to do what? And in this particular case, deploying our police force or our military in peacekeeping efforts is the prerogative of the president and with the requirement of the approval of the National Assembly. And in the case of Haiti, both those two things have been done. You know, the issue of whether Haiti is a difficult or not a difficult position is another matter. Here we're dealing with how does our political system work, and is it necessary for the judiciary to get involved in every aspect of legislation or foreign policy? If it was in the United States, for example, the American courts many times do not get involved in issues that are overly of policy and political issue. They leave that to the executive and to the Congress and the Senate. In this particular case, we're having an activism of some kind in which there is no borders.
Right, thank you.
Between the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. One branch of government seems to be intervening on several aspects relating specifically to the powers that are enshrined in the Constitution to be executed by the executive.
Right, thank you.
Or by the legislature.
Peter Kagwanja, just briefly, I think my music is up as well.
Yes.
My director is hinting.
There are two points that we need to underscore here. Driving the Haiti nation, because it's important. Whether we talk about the law, whether the courts were right or were not wrong in intervening or so on. One is that this mission was initiated as part of our West policy, a kind of agreement with the United States that we deploy. And therefore, that must be put in context. Second, it is the situation we find ourselves in. And the police force and the people involved feel that this is an opportunity to make a dollar or two. And since the money was dangled there, 100 million, whatever it was, then this is denying Kenyans the opportunity to make money and build houses and take their kids to school. Those are their driving forces. The truth of the matter is that the courts are taking, and courts do not initiate positions. The case is brought before the courts. So what we are telling our courts is that they must have a criteria to reject even appeals by people because the executive or the legislators are dealing with them. This is not a matter that was initiated by the courts. It was initiated by Kenyans who went to court and basically appealed to the courts on that matter. And therefore, the courts pronounced itself on what is a policy issue. So in short, I think what is happening is that our court, we are a country that is by rule of law, therefore we must abide by the ruling of the courts. And if you have to change, you change, so that the court accepts, because that is what we say. That is where the oath of office for the heads of states and others is to protect the Constitution. Full stop. There is no way to it that you can maneuver, you can ask Parliament, you can only change to make sure that the court is happy. That's all. You know, and as they say, the law is an ass. You may not be happy with it.
Right. Closing remarks. 10 seconds. Dr. Kanenge.
I think the withdrawal of Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso from ECOWAS is marking a trend that is actually weakening regional intergovernmental organizations, and that is not a very good prospect for the continent.
Mm-hmm. Right. We shall look at that next week. I think we didn't have time to do that. Right. Closing remarks, Dr.
Thank you, Debal. We need to be extremely cautious as a country right now that we invest in ways that are going to make our people not go to the direction that things seem to be going. And I urge all the branches of government to be cautious about this so that we can change direction. People are desperate, people are hungry, and angry too.
They're hungry and they're angry too,
yes.
Right? Yes,
I think given the deteriorating economic conditions in our country, I have said that maybe the best thing for us would be to have a national economic summit in which all the political actors, the civil society, all the stakeholders in our country can come together and look at the state of our economy and what we need to do urgently to be able to change course and put our country on the right track.
Indeed.
Economically.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Gentlemen, I really appreciate it. I think today it's been very emoting because these are very salient issues that are touching Kenyans as it is right now. We didn't even have a handy opportunity to discuss the proposal that is there. There's going to be a legislation that will come to the floor of the House regarding the guards being given power to arrest you without any warrant, right? So your guards will be given that power if the bill that will be sailing through Parliament comes to bear. That is the Private Security Regulations 2024. And we shall be discussing that next week as well. ECOWAS and them